Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and today's video is a continuation of my mini-series in which I'm going through the contenders in the NBA and charting a path for them to win an NBA championship this season. I've already covered both LA teams, with the Clippers being my actual championship pick, and in today's video we're going to be covering the best team in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload every single day. Okay, so the way that this works is first I'm going to go through some pros and cons of the team, and then at the end I'll kind of go through their path and talk about what it would look like if they did actually end up winning the NBA championship. So we're going to start with the positives here for the Milwaukee Bucks. And something that I think is really important for this team that a lot of contenders don't necessarily have at this point in the season is everybody pretty much knows their role on this team. Like, you're not going to get into a playoff series and some random guy is going to start taking contested shots at the end of a close game, right? Like, everybody knows Giannis is the alpha dog. He's what everything revolves around offensively. Then you've got Kris Middleton as a nice second option and someone that can just kind of stay off the ball and shoot and make threes, or he can work in the mid post if Giannis is off the floor. He's their best offensive player. And then Bledsoe is a really nice two-way player that can create some on the ball as well. And then there's everybody else that is essentially just either a specialized shooter or someone that's going to defend well, someone's just going to move the ball, right? Like, they're there to work around the other three guys, and it's pretty clear that it's Giannis, Middleton, and Bledsoe. And I think that's a huge positive for a championship caliber team to go into the postseason knowing this is who we are. And then that goes hand in hand with my next point, and that's just that this is a really well-coached team. Mike Budenholzer, from the minute that he showed up in Milwaukee, has improved this team in virtually every way and has unlocked different parts of Giannis's game, has empowered other players on the roster, and has created a regular season juggernaut in Milwaukee, which again leads to my next point. This team, even though they're not going to get to 7 or 3 wins, right? Like, they're not going to beat the Warriors' record in terms of regular season wins. But you could honestly make a case that this is the best regular season that any team has had in league history. They have the 3rd best offensive rating in the league. They have the best defensive rating in the league, and it's not particularly close. They have the best net rating in the league, and it's not all that close. And they have the best point differential in the entire league, and it's not close. And Giannis is the only guy in this entire roster that's playing more than 30 minutes per game right now as of the recording of this video. Kris Middleton is next at a little bit under 30 minutes per game. And so from a wow, they're really good standpoint, but also from a we're not killing ourselves to push for 70 games standpoint, this is a masterpiece of a regular season in the modern NBA. It's not like they're burning their guys out to get to all of these wins. They're just winning a lot of games because they're playing so well, because they're shooting the ball so well, because they're so good defensively, and they don't even need to play Giannis like 35 minutes a game on most nights to get to what's probably going to be between a 68 and 70 win pace. And then the last positive is, of course, they have the MVP, and they have a system around him that works. They have plenty of shooting. They have guys that can defend. There's really not a weak point on this roster unless you want to poke holes in they don't necessarily have a true second option other than Giannis from a roster construction standpoint. If you want to make that argument, I'm sure people would listen, but Kris Middleton has been really good this season, has a pretty good playoff record, and then Bledsoe is also there. So that's really the only point that you can look at this roster and be like, man, I'm a little bit worried about that, but there are so many positives for this Bucks team, as you would expect from a team that's been this successful in the regular season. However, that's not to say that there's some perfect team, right? Like, there are definitely some negatives, and I do think that the first thing has to revolve around what happens if plan A doesn't work? Like, what happens if Giannis getting to the rim all the time and Giannis getting out in transition? What if that doesn't work? And what if they suddenly have to rely on guys like Kris Middleton and Bledsoe? Do they have a plan B, and is their plan B good enough? Now, if plan A works well enough, then it won't matter, right? But do they have another way that they can play that isn't just Giannis attacking the rim, Giannis getting out in transition and creating for everybody, and then allowing Middleton and Bledsoe to run the team when Giannis isn't on the floor? Do they have another way to play, and can you trust both of those guys to be really, really good in the postseason? Kris Middleton has had his best regular season by far as a pro and has a better playoff performance record than I think a lot of people might think, but there is still the possibility that he struggles in the playoffs, and he certainly won't sustain the numbers that he has in the regular season to this point once we get to the playoffs. And then there's like a 30% chance that you get to the conference finals and Bledsoe just completely disappears from the series. I think that is a legitimate possibility, and those two things are definitely scary if you're a Bucks fan and you are actually thinking that this is going to be like a championship year for this team, is the Middleton-Bledsoe dynamic, but just how else they can play, right? Like, do they have other options? Now, it's entirely possible that they're just saving some things for the playoffs, going super small, having Giannis play more at the 5, having Giannis act as a screener in ball screens, posting him up more. I'm sure they have more offensive stuff that they're just saving for the playoffs as a plan B through F, but it's still just something to think about that they haven't had to really show anything else in the regular season, which is a positive, but do they have something else to go to when times get tough later on in close games in the playoffs? That's still a concern that I have. And then the last thing in terms of a negative is just that they haven't done it before, right? Like there are teams in the playoffs that have won championships before and know what it's like to get to the finals, know what it's like to win the 16 games that you need to win to become an NBA champion. And the Bucks simply don't have that, right? Like they were really good last year in the regular season as well. Not as good as they are this year, but they were still really good, and they couldn't get it done against the Raptors. And that is still something that's going to be over their head until they actually make it happen and they get over the hump. Okay, so with the pros and cons established, let's talk about what the path would actually look like for the Milwaukee Bucks to be NBA champions by the end of the season. So the first thing is obvious. Giannis is the playoff MVP, right? Like he continues to play the way that he is right now in the playoffs, and he is a dominant force on both ends of the floor. He creates everything for them offensively. He takes on tough assignments on defense. He's everywhere protecting the rim defensively. He is a defensive player of the year caliber player in the postseason, and he is still as dominant of an offensive force. That is number one on the list for them to be champions this season. The other part of this is maybe they're a little bit fresher once they get to the finals than maybe a team in the Western Conference, right? Because maybe it's either the LA teams and they've had to go through a little bit more of a gauntlet in the West. I think that's debatable, but if you're thinking about trying to give them every advantage in the finals, ideally they would get there and be fresher than the team from the West, which also bodes well with their regular season strategy of not playing their guys a ton of minutes. And to go along with that on their path to the finals, they're clearly the best team in the East, and Kawhi is no longer there to kind of be this like playoff Giannis stopper that he has been in the past last season. So on paper, it appears as though their path through the East should be not necessarily easy, but maybe shouldn't be super arduous if they are playing up to their potential, right? And they're making their shots and they're playing the way that they want to play and they're controlling the game and Giannis is playing well. The path to the finals shouldn't be especially difficult in an ideal world. And then once they get to the finals, they're just straight up better than either LA team or whoever meets them in the finals. For me, I think it's going to be one of the LA teams, so let's just roll with that for right now. They have the defensive matchups for LeBron and AD, one of the few teams in the entire league that actually have guys that they can throw at those two players and survive and not get absolutely destroyed with those two guys on the floor. And they're just deeper and they have better shooting than the Lakers once they get there, and that pushes them over the top. And then if they end up facing the Clippers, they're just more cohesive than that Clippers team, and they have better chemistry, and Giannis gets over the Kawhi thing and outplays him in a series, and they just have better shooting than the Clippers, and the depth kind of is pretty even between those two teams. Like that's the path if they get into the finals in a series against either LA team. It's just that they're better, right, when they get there at the end of the day. Now, having said that, I didn't pick this team to win the title in my first video that kind of kicked off this series. I picked the Clippers, and that's just because I think the Clippers are a little bit deeper, they're a little bit more talented, and I know that they're not as cohesive as the Bucks right now, but if they get fully healthy in the playoffs, I think that's the best team. I think that's the best roster, right? But if I had to pick a second team, I do think it would be the Bucks. They are right there with the Clippers in terms of depth, in terms of shooting, in terms of knowing who they are. They're even better than the Clippers in terms of knowing who they are, and they've obviously had a better regular season. But the Giannis versus Kawhi thing, if they're going up against each other in a head-to-head matchup in the finals, I'm still leaning towards Kawhi just because I've seen it, right? Not that Giannis is incapable of being an outstanding playoff performer and being someone that can lead your team to a championship. And I think eventually he will get there, whether it's this season or at some point down the road. I'm going with something that's a little bit more tangible, that I've actually seen from Kawhi Leonard leading multiple teams to championships, winning a finals MVP, and being the guy that really flipped that series between the Bucks and the Raptors last season. Once he switched onto Giannis, he didn't necessarily take him out of the game, but he made things a lot more difficult. And if that is the matchup, then I like that Clippers team just a little bit better, but it is extremely, extremely close. And the Bucks have been wildly impressive the entire regular season. So they would be my second choice team in terms of a team that I think can win the title. And the Lakers would be third on that list for me. But as always, I'd love to know what you guys have to say down in the comment section below in terms of who you think will be winning the championship this season, as well as who else you would like to see me cover in this series. I'm going to get to a lot of teams because I still have plenty of time to cover a handful of different teams, but be sure to let me know down in the comment section below which teams you want to see the most in this series. But that is going to be the end of today's video. I thank you all very much for watching. Like I said at the beginning, my name is Tucker. I would appreciate if you guys would subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. And yeah, I'll see you all next time.